Hello, I'm Marius Hoggenmueller and I'm presenting the paper Stop and Smell the Chalk Flowers, a robotic probe for investigating urban interaction with physicalized displays. This paper is co-authored with Hespanhol and Martin Tomitsch. Governments, organizations and tech companies around the world are not only collecting and analyzing data, but increasingly turning to urban robots for automating processes and services with the aim to make cities more efficient and productive. However, the development of smart cities also triggered heated debates, with some arguing that the matter of productivity should be dissociated from speed and efficiency. Instead, designers and urban planners should question how to make cities more livable, regarding people as co-creators instead of simply consumers, and create cities for slowing down and getting lost. In this exploratory design work, we created Woodie, a slow-moving robot that draws on the ground using conventional chalk sticks. Capable of drawing various predefined designs, Woodie uses the public space as a large horizontal canvas. As robots are increasingly being tested in real-world urban contexts, our aim was to investigate their potential for triggering urban reflection, getting lost in cities, and slowing down. Our study builds on and contributes to the field of pervasive displays, which has been extensively studied by the KAI community. Compared to smartphones, pervasive displays enable a push-based distribution of content that is addressed to the public. However, several works reported that passers-by tend to ignore digital screens. Therefore, researchers also investigated and documented the use of non-digital displays, for example, using chalk. Kuhlmann et al. Used chalk spray stencils to display urban data visualizations on the pavement. They outlined several qualities of non-digital public visualizations. For example, they reported that textures and materiality, as well as the horizontal position of content, attracted passers-by to approach the visualizations. Another study reported that the presence of researchers in manually updating the displays created additional engagement around the intervention. Although those studies suggest that non-digital displays can address some of the socio-technical pitfalls related to digital urban displays, their hyperlocal scale and impact remain unaddressed limitations. Prior to the work presented in this paper, we developed a taxonomy that classifies current approaches of pervasive displays based on two dimensions: the level of physical integration of content into the surrounding environment and the levels of mobility of the display technology. In regards to the question how to replicate and scale up the qualities of non-digital public displays, we found that there is a promising but underexplored design space of pervasive display systems that distribute content in a highly physical form and being capable of autonomously changing their position. One of the few examples illustrating this design space comes from the design office led by Ratti. They deployed a swarm of drones to spray paint a collaborative artwork on a vertical, large-scale canvas. In order to further explore this design space, we followed a research through design process. Instead of asking how to make a thing right, the research investigates the question: what is the right thing to design, and what are the areas of designing robots for? This exploratory and generative approach fits well with the speculative nature of our investigation. Questioning in which new ways urban robots can be used in public space, apart from completing utilitarian tasks, we followed Gaber's definition of research through design, providing the ability to create multiple new worlds rather than describing a single existing one. In the following, I share a few of the design considerations we made for Woodie. A more comprehensive list can be found in our paper. In line with our goal of enticing curiosity by avoiding any obvious association about how a robot should look like, we decided early on not to give Woodie anthropomorphic features. Instead, we decided for a circular body, allowing the robot to move in any direction without having to reposition its face. Woodie should be large enough to be noticed by passers-by, yet small enough not to become an obstacle to them. Slowness emerged as another important feature for Woodie, as it should move slow enough to allow for thoughtful appreciation by the public, as well as not to compromise the free movement of pedestrians. As we deployed Woodie in the context of a public light festival, we aimed to align the visualizations with the theme of the festival, which was love, peace, and harmony. We used simple shapes such as flowers and hearts. An important aspect at this prototyping stage was to explore the characteristic style of the drawings. After several tests, drawing on various grounds, we realized that highly geometric vector graphics convey the impression that the drawings are imperfect. On the other hand, less geometric, hand-sketched drawing styles worked well with Woodie's limited drawing accuracy. In addition to creating public display through drawing on the ground, Woodie should also have communicative features. Following recommendations from research on autonomous vehicles and robots, Woodie should be capable of visually representing its internal mode and intent. We chose a low-res LED lighting display given their established aesthetic qualities. We deployed Woodie in a major business and residential district around 10 kilometers away from the city center of Sydney. As mentioned before, the installation was part of an annual light festival. The area in which Woodie was drawing on the ground was roughly 15 meters in length and 5 meters in width. The robot was deployed for 17 days during evening hours. On most of the evenings, we provided chalk sticks to participants so that they could add their own content. Throughout the intervention, we conducted 21 semi-structured interviews. Further, we took observation notes on site with a total of 53 hours of on-site observations. On 10 evenings, we also recorded the intervention with a GoPro camera. We transcribed our interviews and conducted a thematic analysis of both the interview data and the notes from our field observations. Video recordings were used to gain further insights into particular observations and to add contextual data to comments made in interviews. I will discuss some of the main results of our study around the following themes: types of engagement, audience behavior and grouping, and emotional response towards Woodie. A more comprehensive discussion can be found in our paper. Based on our observations and interviews, we identified several types of engagement. If the intervention successfully evoked people's attention, the initial state of being curious would transition into a more in-depth phase of observing. Often we saw children sitting on the ground next to Woodie to observe the drawing process for several minutes. Another important type of engagement was the ability to co-create with Woodie. People would add their own content or extend Woodie's drawings. Often we also observed children drawing their own interpretations of robots. However, we also often observed adults adding their drawings on the ground. In this image, you can see how a man acts as a street performer next to Woodie. When successfully engaged in longer-lasting engagement, we observed that some people, in particular children, tended to get very close to the robot, while others would keep a distance because they were worried to disturb Woodie. Despite Woodie's spherical shape, looking similar from all sides, people were often readjusting their standing position. One explanation for this behavior could be that, depending on which direction Woodie was drawing, the chalk stick, which was pulled behind, could be more visible and better observed. In these longer-lasting engagement situations, we could observe different types of audience groupings. In situations when chalk sticks were not available and only Woodie was drawing, we observed focus groups of people standing around Woodie, similar to a street performance. For small to medium-sized groups, Woodie was visible from a distance when approaching the site, and people were then encouraged to join the group. Larger groups, however, would obstruct the robot's view from afar, with people standing and sitting around Woodie in multiple rows. In those situations, the audience itself acted as a display, with new arrivals trying to find a free spot. When we did provide chalk sticks to the public, we observed a diffuse distribution of people spread over the whole area. The diffuse distribution of people was enticed by what we refer to in our paper as the cracked honeypot effect. The emerging content created new display spaces at which people stopped by, reflected on existing drawings, and added their own content. Our data analysis revealed that people had a variety of emotional responses to Woodie. Many referred to Woodie as something cute and that they want to take home. One woman who performed in front of the robot mentioned, "It's not interactive, but it makes people interact. It responds to me like nature responds to me." The pattern of relating Woodie to natural phenomena was also apparent in comments by others. For example, one female stated that a robot feels more like a living organism. Sometimes people were also speculating about gender and character traits, asking whether Woodie is a male or a female and if it's serious. Here are our lessons learned for scaling up physicalized displays through urban robots. Rendering visualizations on the ground attracts people. Using an urban robot to print content in a physicalized form allows to arbitrarily increase the display area, which is merely restricted by physical rather than technical constraints. Woodie successfully acted as a facilitator for participatory placemaking. The integrated low-res lighting display attracted people to approach the intervention site and explore the chalk drawings on the ground. The curiosity triggered by Woodie's presence fostered social interactions among people, such as talking about the robot and the content itself. Previous work reported that researchers manually updating content functions as a spark for social interaction. We argue that urban robots, visibly creating physicalized displays, can replicate this role. Early studies reported that delayed periodic update cycles can create additional anticipation around urban data visualizations. Slowing down the rendering process itself, we found, can further increase the dwell time of people. Our study confirmed the attractiveness of non-digital physical displays in regard to their materiality and transient qualities. Additionally, the characteristic aesthetics of the robot's drawings, in comparison to those made by people, added another layer of implicit information to the content. The majority of research on human-robot interaction focuses on usability factors. However, an emergent trend within the Chi community is to also apply exploratory design research to this field. In our study, the open-ended approach revealed interesting insights, for example, in regard to people's emotional response to Woodie and some people treating the robot as a living being. We argue for the importance of studying robots in the wild in order to obtain more generative insight about people's behavior around and perception of robots in a natural setting. For an in-depth discussion of our findings, read our paper "Stop and Smell the Chalk Flowers, a robotic probe for investigating urban interaction with physicalized displays."